Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today's topic is going to be about systems and dissociation as a problem of working memory. So these two topics are quite separate, but I feel like for people who suffer with trauma and dissociation that they intertwine, and understanding how they overlap with each other has brought me a lot of healing and some significant changes to my life that I feel that I want to share with you guys. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is systems, and I don't mean systems as in our internal system of parts and how they work together, although I do feel like that is a reflection of how I'm going to talk about systems today. So my interest in this topic started because in therapy, my counsellor kept asking me what I wanted to do next. And I had this innate fear of setting goals. Like, I just didn't know where to start. It would fill me with absolute dread. I would have a void inside that sort of spun me into nothingness and lostness, and I just felt so resistant, like I wanted to run away. And I'm not normally like that in therapy. I normally am curious about things and I try and embrace it, and that's a learned thing that took me some time. But the fact that I hadn't had that reaction this time made me realise that it was something that I needed to question and be curious about in myself. So I watched a lot of videos on goal setting and such, and nothing changed, if I'm really honest. And in the past, I've done some videos on daily structure and the importance of having a routine. And you know what? I'm going to be really honest. I had no idea why it was important. I just did it because everybody kept telling me it was important and it was something I should do, whether that be my counsellor or the trauma books I was reading or research or whatever. And same with grounding. It was just a case of it didn't work. And then one day it just did, and something clicked. And when it worked, it really helped. But the period where it didn't work was so frustrating and it really annoyed me. And I thought, it would be really cool if I could work out why it didn't work and then suddenly did, and to be able to articulate that to other people who were maybe still in that phase and give them some encouragement, because it's really hard to keep doing stuff when you don't see that it's making any benefit and it's taking up resources from you in terms of mental and physical energy to do these things. So I wanted to go back to the beginning where I said there was two topics today. I think I've talked a little bit about systems, and the next thing I wanted to talk about is a concept that dissociation is a problem of working memory. And I came across this idea from an article that I'd read about a lady whose brother had grown up with autism. And she had been taught by the carers in his life and professionals that would come in and help that it was they just needed an intervention. So they had to find a way of him doing things that he found difficult. And to me that made a lot of sense, because we can all do stuff. We just might have to do it differently. But the way we do things differently is actually quite beautiful, and it's a reflection of who we are, or it can be when we start to learn who we are. And then she talks about how later on in life she was diagnosed with ADHD, and the lady said that when she realised that her ADHD wasn't a lack of focus that was the problem, it was an issue with working memory. She was able to create interventions in her life that freed up her working memory. And as soon as I read that, it was like a light bulb came on. I suddenly understood why doing all these things that I was told to do by my counsellor didn't work, and then it did. Because my brain had done it enough times to create a new system in my head that was the default. So when I was stressed out and I was tired, my new default became grounding. Or my new default became looking at the stack of dishes, and instead of being filled with shame-based fury of perfectionist overactivity, cleaning the dishes and then collapsing exhausted afterwards, my brain was like, well, on a good day, I know that I can catch up with that pile of dishes in 20 minutes. And I'm talking like I've got every dish in the kitchen sitting in the sink. It will take me 20 minutes to wash everything up. Now, the reason for that is because I'd minimise the stuff in my kitchen. And the other reason for that is because I didn't have to think about how to do it, because I had a system. I already knew how to do it because I'd done it and solved the problems many times over before. So I really wanted to break that down, because the system came about over a lot of incremental steps. So let's stick with dishes just because it's something that I've been talking about. But when I walked up to the sink, I would feel overwhelmed, like I didn't know how to start. Like I didn't know whether I should start with the cutlery or the plates. And I had all these thoughts in my head about different times when I'd been told that I'd done it wrong, and I was trying to find the perfect way of navigating the chessboard, so to speak, to get to checkmate so I couldn't get told off. And the first step to me doing the dishes was accepting that I didn't have to play that game anymore, and it was okay just to pick something. So I picked cutlery the first time, and then the second time I did the dishes, I thought, it was really hard cleaning the cutlery because it was really intricate. So maybe if I let the cutlery soak and do the plates first, that the cutlery would be a bit easier. So I started with the plates, and that seemed to work okay. So I'd solved that problem. And then I would just wash dishes until I got tired, and then I'd go and sit down. And then the next time, one of the littles was out, and I had to work out that she had the dexterity problems, didn't know how to use her hands, and so I bought palm scrubber. And the next time I tried out the palm scrubber, and that worked, so that was one less problem to solve. And gradually over time, I roughly worked out that if I'm an adult, when I'm out, so whether that's me or one of my other adult parts, they can do the dishes in about 20 minutes. If one of the littles are out, I'll probably leave a good hour, maybe 2 hours if I'm sore, so that I can be patient with them while they do the dishes. So now when I go in the kitchen and I look at the pile of dishes, I don't see shame. I just see that's 20 minutes of work when I'm feeling better. And it's allowed me to kind of look at things differently. And it's allowed me to give myself permission as well to identify what's essential. Like, if I'm having a bad day, I can just say, well, maybe today self-care is more important, and if I need a dish, I'll just go and wash up that one dish, and that's enough. And in doing that, I've created a new experience for myself, and it's also taught me to respect my capacity in terms of my working memory and my physical working energy. And if any of you don't follow the entropy system, I really recommend you go over to her channel. And I don't think it was Win that did this video. I think it was one of her other parts. They did a video on the spoon theory, and it was a mental health version of the fork theory that talks about having physical energy and making sure you spend it wisely, and it really helped me. So at the beginning of the day, when I've got to look at what I've got to do, I always think about how many sporks, how many forks and spoons I've got for the day. And in doing that, it's been really freeing, because then I get to choose what I want to spend my spoons and my forks on, rather than feeling like obliged to do all these things. So when I'm feeling all right, I will sit and think about what are the most important things in my life right now. And every month I might revisit that. But in general, it's I have to look after myself first. Then I need to take care of my relationships. And then there's certain things in my life, like going to church for socialising, or my artwork for my own self, or my therapy homework. You know, those things come after looking after myself and looking after my husband. Like basic needs. So by thinking about dissociation as a problem of working memory, it actually makes a whole lot of sense, because a lot of I call it the inertia, the friction when you start going and trying to do something, is in the fact that we have all of these trauma memories that we're trying to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And normal daily life things can trigger us, and we can be doing one thing and be triggered by something else. And our working memory gets used up really quickly, because we've got, if you think about our brain as a computer program, every part of us is like having a new tab open. And if you get too many tabs open, eventually the system crashes, because you've run out of working memory. Now, there's a couple of things that help free up working memory, and unfortunately a lot of those come later on in recovery, when you've started to process the trauma memories and they get filed as past, because we've learned the lesson that we needed to learn, and we can file away that memory with the knowledge, that lesson that we learned, and have a bigger space for working out day-to-day life problems. But what we can't do is work out life problems and trauma problems at the same time, because we don't have enough memory. And that is the actual cause of us not being able to do things, not being able to start things. And I think once we appreciate that about ourselves, and just accepting it as a fact of how our brain works, it takes away a lot of the shame and the guilt that we should be better, we should be able to do better. Why am I so broken? Why am I not normal like everybody else? Why can't I just? Well, why can't you just? Is because you've already gone through more than anybody could possibly cope with as a child. And what your brain did was portion out your working memory into different parts of your brain and gave them different functions, so that when you're in that part of your brain, you only have to focus on that one function. It solved your working memory problem. It was adaptive. But as an adult, it's not adaptive anymore. We need to integrate again. And I don't mean integration as in parts coming together, although some people do choose that for their system. I mean, we need to integrate our memory, because there's something called the cycle of abuse, and I hate that terminology, because it often leads to people feeling like it's their own fault that they kept getting abused in life, and I don't agree with that. But the powerful thing in accepting that the cycle of abuse is a thing, even if you change the words to something less triggering, is accepting that the way we dealt with things as children was the best we could come up with our child knowledge. But as adults, we have far more resources available to us. We've got far more experiences when we combine everything that we've been through together. And when we can process that in a way that we make reconnections in our mind about, in this scenario, this worked, and we've solved this problem before, the more free working memory we get now in our adult life. And to me, that's the number one reason to keep trying and keep wanting to get better and keep wanting to heal. And I'm sharing this with you because often we think that we can kind of hack the system and we can just make it all go away, and we can push it aside and not deal with it. And if it's not real, then it didn't happen, then there's nothing wrong with me and I can just carry on with normal life. But that keeps tripping us up because we haven't resolved the working memory issue in our brain. We've just ignored it. And that's part of the reason why my first podcast was about ending stigma, starting with ourselves, is because until we can accept that we have this working memory problem and our brain has created a system to cope with that, which is fragmenting our memory, we will be stuck in that same system. And the video that I watched about setting up systems rather than goals, she had a really good quote in there that says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. And that's so true, especially for us as trauma survivors, is we will always fall back to our default of fragmentation because it's worked. And until we give ourselves a new reality, a new experience where something else works, and we keep consistently trying to do that and keep consistently having experiences that work for us, our brain won't switch out from this default. It's an evidence-based processing machine. So we need to give it new evidence. We need to keep trying new systems. And it's not a failure to try a system and it not work. For me, my definition of failure for myself is not trying and giving up before I get the answer. And I feel like that has given me back the power, because the difference between me succeeding and not is not whether I meet some arbitrary performance goal or set specific standards for myself. It's, did I try today? And if I tried, then I'm good enough. That was really hard to say. I still feel emotional saying that because so much of my life I was told that I wasn't good enough. And in a sense, from a performance-based, I might not do good enough, but just to be is good enough. And that new definition of what good enough means is so helpful. So I don't want to talk for too long, because I know when I was first starting out that, you know, I could only concentrate for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I try and keep these podcasts about half an hour so that I can really get to grips with the topic, but not too much. So if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about today, I would love it if you would leave them down below. I'd be really interested to know if there's things that you struggle with that you would want to be future topics on the podcast, and just to get some feedback, really, like, because I'm talking from my own experience and I don't know if I'm helping anyone and you might have a completely different experience, and that could help somebody else who's having the same problem. Because at the end of the day, like, my answer might not be your answer, and the beauty is in the process of finding out and setting up your own system and understanding your own capacity and becoming who you really are. And before I sign off, I just wanted to say, if no one else has told you today, I love you guys and I really appreciate your time listening to me. Take care of yourselves. Bye.